9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. Liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Roger, Tower.
Welcome to the Alien Probe Podcast. It is Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. I'm Doug, this is Alysse, and once again we have Ella LeBain following up on the great Jimmy Church episode. That was fantastic. Oh wait, you got to do this.
Oh.
You got to do that, okay. How are you, Ella? How's it? It's been over a year since we've talked to you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me back.
How? So you have a new, I don't think I realized last time I talked to you, you have a degree in astronomy?
Yes, I minored. I was in a biological research center, minored in it, and then I went on to complete Astronomy 1 at the Hayden Planetarium. They were running a program there in the 80s. So, but it led me into astrology.
That's
so go figure.
Interesting.
It's older than astronomy.
Yeah.
Interesting transition.
Yeah, because it's language of the stars. So that's my recent book, which I start. They say the last shall be first and the first shall be last, and I actually started this book. Like that was my first one in 1990, but I shelved it so many times, so I finally published it last September. So 6 months ago. It's called Heaven's Witness, and it's connecting the dots to the Mazarot, which is the Hebrew for the constellations. So it's cosmology, astrology, and astronomy. And I connect the dots to the End Time Prophecies and the ETs.
So Nibiru is going to come and kill us all? Is that how it's going to end here?
It's more like a new age, right?
I think humans are doing a good job of that alone without Nibiru, but yes, we're getting influenced by that. Nibiru is not going to hit the planet, but it is going to create an atmospheric storm. So that's what the prophecies all pointed to, like the Joel 2:31 that said that the sun will go dark like sackcloth, and it will be like 3 days of darkness, and then the moon will turn like blood. And these are not normal eclipses, not a blood moon eclipse, which happens pretty often, and eclipses happen like clockwork every 6 months. This is happening all at the same time, and solar and lunar eclipses can't happen simultaneously. This is the presence of this atmospheric storm from Nibiru's debris tails, which is red iron oxide. So it temporarily blocks out the sun. It gets in between the earth and the sun and the moon, and then the moon turns red. So that is a major earth change. And but it's a temporary thing. It's not going to last. It's a passing. And then as it goes around the sun will catapult it back out to its orbit, and that it'll pass the earth the second time, and that's when it will complete the pole shift, because the prophecy says that the Lord will turn the earth upside down, which is kind of biblical vernacular for pole shift. But we already see it happening. So the process has begun.
It is moving. Yeah, like I don't know where it is now, but it's going to get into I'm going to get into Siberia eventually, or that'll be.
It's there now, right?
Is it
Siberia?
Is it in Siberia, the pole, the magnetic north or whatever?
Yes, wow. You are right.
Wow, that's amazing.
So that's like about a 45-degree shift from where we started, which was the Canadian Arctic. So now it's in Siberia, Russia. So yeah, that's right.
So how many books have you written? Is it 14? Do you have 14 books?
Oh no, no, not quite.
Seven. Seven?
I've published six, and the seventh one is on
Okay.
its should be available around the first week of May.
And is that through your website or Amazon?
Both. Amazon worldwide, the marketplace. So paperback, Kindle, and I've just published three of my books in audio.
Oh,
So
good.
book one, the original Who's Who in the Cosmic Zoo, is now on audio on Amazon. And book three, Who Are the Angels, and book five, The Heavens, which is all about Nibiru, that one, is all on audio books now.
I better read that. Who did the narration? Did you do it?
No, Amazon offered this to me like as a beta test because they just started this. So I got to. So I picked this very gentle female voice because it's a lot of words and I don't want people getting irritated by the voice. So it's kind of soothing.
You probably don't want me to do that. Yeah, for sure.
No,
loud and boisterous. From the first book to the seventh, what is the relationship with each book to the next? Is it not a chronological, or is it you just discussing different cosmic zoo type things?
Yes, I couldn't put everything in one, so just kind of, organized it, separated it, because I started my work in the 90s teaching these classes, ETs, aliens, or angels, and so that kind of was the basis for the book series. So the first book is basically discerning and identifying who the ETs and the aliens are, and also the situation with the alien abductions and the government cover-ups and disclosure. So I get into all of that in book one. And then book two is just about the gods, because there were gods that were really extraterrestrials and who the god of gods is, and, that whole cosmic drama. And the whole cast of characters of gods that are actually in the Old Testament that most people don't realize because it's been mistranslated in English and everybody thinks they're reading about the same God because they just use the words Lord and God, but the Hebrew discerns these different names and characters and pluralities. And so I get into all that in book two. And then book three is all about the angels. And there's like the whole drama of the fallen angels, the angelic war, who are the good angels, and they're all ETs. I mean, the word angel just means messenger.
I have a question about book two. When you're talking about gods, is it specific the gods or the people from the Bible, or does that include like the gods from India, Krishna and all of that?
Well, that's a great question. Alysse, as a matter of fact, the Old Testament refers to these other gods. So like we just celebrated Passover, and Exodus, the book of Exodus tells the whole story about Passover, and Exodus 12:12 reveals the other gods. So that was part like what the story was focused on Egypt, but there were, Egypt used to be a polytheistic
many gods, yes.
Yes, so there were many gods, and that was, the basis of that Passover story, which, by the way, was the last time Nibiru passed the earth, was during that time period. So, it's roughly, depending on who you listen to, and there's been a lot of calendar shenanigans, where they've changed calendars, deleted years. So it's roughly between 1290 and 1430 BC. And that, brings us close to having another pass of Nibiru, because all those plagues, even though they were used as judgments and punishments on these lesser gods, by the Father God, the God of gods, they were still situations that are happening now due to the the parade of the debris tail of Nibiru, such as the red iron oxide turned the Nile blood red, the 10 plagues, and the locusts, and the hailstones, and all this stuff. So a lot of that was related to the climate change that Nibiru was creating.
Does it have people on it? Does it have civilization on Nibiru, or is it the Anunnaki still, or what's going on with Nibiru? Do we know?
Well, we know basically from what the ancients, the Sumerians, left us stories that were written in stone, and Zacharias Sitchin was able to translate, and he wrote 12 books called the Earth Chronicles, and his first book was called The 12th Planet, which was all about Nibiru. So we know that yes, there were several groups of beings. The word Anunnaki was Sumerian for basically extraterrestrial. I mean, he translated was, he who comes from heaven to earth. So let's just call him an ET, okay?
Yeah.
And so, but there were groups of them, and the stories in the Sumerian tablets told us about battles between them. There was like a hierarchy. It was like a family drama between the father and these two sons, and then the nephew Marduk, and there was a lot of uprising. That kind of an Avengers kind of movie type thing.
Wow.
So they wanted to lay claim, to the earth and also to people, and so things are coming full circle because it's at the end of this age, the processional age, which we're finishing up the age of Pisces, and this is where the prophecies point to, is the end of this processional age, and they are returning to harvest the earth from their seed, their genetic seed. So it was a lot of genetic manipulation that went on. And there's nothing new under the sun, because the same type of thing is happening today, not only with the surface humans, but also with what's going on with the alien human hybridization program that's happening, underground, on the moon. That's what the alien abductions are about.
And Ella, on your interview with Jimmy Church, you guys were talking about how Nibiru changes time, and you were going through the timelines, and basically you were saying that, this century, Nibiru was supposed to make its appearance. I found that really interesting when you were just, going through all the timelines and everything.
Yes, and that's what I focused on in my recent book 6, Heaven's Witness, was the calendar shenanigans and the time manipulations. So I have this chapter. Does anybody really know what time it is after the Chicago song, remember?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They're my favorite group.
Yeah, me too. And so, we've been messed with so many times, and that's why I don't make predictions, because every time you set the bar, someone will come along and either shift the timeline, which we know, because I think you might be referring to when I was telling him about this interview that I watched with Jeremy Corbell. He was on this documentary, and the producer was asking him, because he was saying that they have intel that there are these ships that there's going to be, and we've been seeing this lately. It's, you got to do is Google it. It's in the news. I posted on my Facebook if anybody is interested, but that they're expecting this fleet of spaceships coming into our solar system. So when he was asked about this, the producer said, well, when? And he said, well, if I tell you when and they hear me, they're just going to change it.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, what? Because he's speaking my language, because that's exactly what I've been saying in my book about how they keep manipulating the timeline. Okay. So, and I connect dots. So I go back into the prophecy, and the Bible, the ancient Bible prophecy that speaks of the end times, talks about the Antichrist is going to change times and seasons. Well, we already know that the Church of Rome has done that. because they were the ones who changed the calendar from the Julian, which was the astronomically more accurate, correct calendar, because it had to do with like star time, kind of like Star Trek, star date, XX, whatever. So they switched that, and they created their own calendar, which was called the Gregorian calendar after Pope Gregory. But the calendar that we're on today has absolutely no astronomical relevance whatsoever. Okay, because that's why every month is different. Every 4 years they have to add a day just to reconcile, and there's a lot of fuzzy math going on. So then I found out, okay, well then the Jewish calendar is, out of all the calendars, that one has the most astronomically relevance because it includes the solar and the lunar. Okay, and Earth is in the middle of the sun and the moon, so it makes perfect sense. So I thought, okay, well, they must have it right. And then I go down the rabbit hole, and I find out, whoa, they deleted 200 years. And I'm like, why? And that's because Nibiru changes time. So they couldn't reconcile. So they just thought, we'll just delete it. Okay. And also there were missing pieces with the history of what happened during the Exodus. So that's another discrepancy, because the Israelites were supposed to be slaves in Egypt for 400 years, but it turned out it was only 84 years. Okay. So they ended up in Babylon, and Babylon is where all this stuff comes out of. And that's when they basically deleted 200 years. Don't ask me why, but they just couldn't reconcile because things that didn't match. So suffice to say that the Jewish calendar is accurate with the sun and the moon, but they changed it. So it used to be like Enochian, all right? And Enoch was a frequent flyer. He was up and down. He never died. He ascended multiple times. He came back and forth to Earth and brought knowledge. He brought the language, and he brought all this astronomical data. And he also told us all about the 200 B'nai HaElohim, they call them, which is the sons of God, all right? Second generation that came to Earth. This is the fallen angel story. And they came and they taught humans all this stuff. One of them was in charge of teaching humans astrology. So if there's an angel coming out of heaven teaching somebody astrology, it must be a thing, right? It wasn't just made up by men. And they taught humans warfare and how to make weapons and how to create makeup and jewelry and all kinds of stuff, right? But there was a war, all right? So Enoch tells us all about this, and he had his own calendar. And then there was a split within the Jewish community, and it all had to do with the captivity in the 70-year captivity they had in Babylon. And I don't know why they did this. My assessment is because of Nibiru, because they can't reconcile the time when Nibiru comes and shifts the earth. And so I included this research because I lived this in 2004. A lot of you guys were around too. And if you remember, that year we had these major earth changes. So there was a 9.0 earthquake in Chile. And when that happened, and you can look this up, it's still relevant.
The tsunami in Thailand.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just was watching a documentary on it like just 2 weeks ago.
Yes. And that happened. That was the Boxing Day, right? So that was all in the same year that this happened. And so what they were saying was that when that 9.0 happened, it literally shook the earth off the axis for like 20 seconds. So 20 seconds may not sound like a big deal, but if you add 20 seconds every day and then over years, you've got some missing time. And also because people started saying this, so that our consciousness and our awareness and our experience plays in. Oh, it feels like things are speeding up, right? How many times have you heard people say that?
It feels like it to me, but I'm 65, so time
I just figure
slips by rather quickly.
The older you get, the faster time goes.
Well, that's true as well. That's like a perception thing. But these were,
Might be,
people,
it could be real, yeah, for sure.
So but and it's true because it really did shave, 20 seconds off the day. So when you look at stuff like that, you can extrapolate it out and say, well, each time these major Earth changes happen, it changes time. So that could be a reason why they deleted 200 years from their calendar. Okay, so going back to the Jewish calendar, their calendar ends at 6,000. All right. So we went through this whole thing on December 21st of 2012. You remember that. And that was like the end of the Mayan calendar, and the world was going to end. And that didn't. What it was, because their calendar, Mayan, was a galactic calendar. So it wasn't based on the sun and the moon and the earth. It was based on where the earth was in the position of the galaxy. And December 21st of 2012 was an eclipse of our sun with the galactic sun, okay, which happens at 26 degrees of Sagittarius. So that had to do, in my opinion, okay, it wasn't like the end of things, obviously, but it had to do with their belief that opened up something to enter something else into the solar system. And in my opinion, that is Nibiru. So I think that's what they were pointing to. So there's all these different calendars, and that's why it's like nut making, like how do you know who to look at? But the Jewish calendar is very specific. So it ends at 6,000 years. And they believe that after 6,000 years, when they enter into the 7,000, that is the Messianic age. That is which corresponds to the millennial reign of Christ on earth that the book of Revelation points to, which is all one and the same. Okay, so a lot of Jews don't know yet that Yeshua is the Messiah. Okay, but then there's a lot of Jews that do know that. Okay, and that's all part of the end time prophecy as well, because the end time prophecy is that not only were the Jews supposed to return to Israel, which has happened, okay, 1948, but that they were also supposed to wake up and return to the true Messiah. So they believe that when the calendar ends, that's when the Messiah returns or comes, okay? So if right now we're at 5785, according to their calendar, but they deleted 200 years. So if you add it back, that's 59. And that means there's 15 years left for it to be the 6,000 mark. So it's confusing, but and the whole thing's a big mess. And that's why maybe, and this was my conclusion in the book, is that this was done by design, that this was done to keep us away from understanding what's going on, which was the reason that the Church of Rome changed the calendar and there was no astronomical relevance to it whatsoever, because they wanted to change the times and the seasons because they wanted to control people. And they didn't want people, intuiting what was happening. And there were, tribes all over the earth used to live and farm and do everything based on the stars and the sun and the moon. And they wanted to get people off of that. So that's one aspect of it. And then, of course, the other aspect is Nibiru, which they've covered up as well. So,
do you think that when Nibiru makes its appearance, whether that's 15 years from now and 2040 or in this century, do you think that that's when disclosure will happen and we'll actually find out from the government, yes, they're here, they've been coming? Because there's all the controversy about disclosure, and that the ETs are saying that we're not ready yet, but maybe when Nibiru makes its appearance, we will be ready. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, those are all great questions. The prophecy says that there's going to be catastrophic disclosure, which is something that our government is very worried about. They've been trying to prevent that. They've been involved in all these agreements, which holds them back from full disclosure, which is why we get drip disclosure. So if it wasn't for the whistleblowers, we'd all be, left in the dark like mushrooms and fed what. So we're able to piece things together because of what the whistleblowers have been telling us over the years. So thank God for that. Whether our government is going to there's going to be pieces, like a carrot here and there, another layer of it. I don't believe that they're going to give the whole enchilada because there's so many problems with that, with national security, with breaking these agreements, and national security is probably the biggest thing because they are in agreements, working agreements, contracts, okay, with these groups of ETs that coexist on the planet with us. They live inside the planet. They're helping them with different things that have to do with security. They know what's coming, and they also know what's already here. So, like the ships that we talked about earlier that are supposed to be coming, that Jeremy Corbell said was 2027, which is only 2 years from now. And he hesitated giving that date because he said, if I tell you that date, we can talk about who they are, but they will just manipulate the timeline and shift it, and it'll be another date. Okay, so it's a big, it's like a big ball of yarn that needs to be like pulled and untangled to really understand what's happening. And so much of it has been covered up by design because they don't want people to panic. And just look at how everybody is. All right. So that's the reason why the Galactic Federation on Earth told Chaim Eshed that we're not ready, because people are still battling each other. People can't even accept differences between us, and we're all the same human race. And it's like, how can they be expected to accept ET, who is obviously going to be different than us? Maybe they'll look like us, maybe they'll be a better version of us, maybe they'll, some of them, like the Nordics and the blondes, the human ETs, are like the Avenger types, and in this tight spacesuits, and they're beautiful and they have it all going for them. But their knowledge and advancement and all of that, that's like, whoa, a lot of people can't relate to that. They can't even relate to human beings who may have like high IQs, or they may be genius, and they just, so it's the way we treat each other on this planet that bothers them. And also the fact that we have nuclear weapons, that bothers them. Okay, so that's part of the whole national security issue, why they're not going to have full disclosure, because then they're going to reveal like who's been helping who. And we have foreign adversaries on this planet who would, do anything to know what America knows with the agreements that they're in. And I do believe, because I've been watching this over the years, that, like, for instance, America and Russia. So we have America, Russia, China, are like the three big ones, right? And what's going on. I don't have to tell you, but, let's not forget this piece of history, that World War II, the Americans and the Soviets were allies. They both walked away with the spoils of war, which was the Nazi technologies, the alien technologies. The Nazis had already started reverse engineering, okay, and they did it in Antarctica. So the Americans and the Russians ended up in these joint bases in Antarctica, overseeing the alien tech, and that created the secret space program that's been going on for 75 years. So do you really think that our government is going to tell everybody that?
They're not going to tell anybody anything.
Like you said, breadcrumbs.
Whistleblowers are going to, like you said, whistleblowers are going to be where it's at.
Yeah.
We're not going to be. Yeah, the government's not going to march ET out on stage and go, well, now here we are, and here he is. Or here's a spaceship or a saucer or whatever. They're never going to do that. It'll be, the David Grushes of the world, and others that are going to help us out,
etc.
I've got a question on the pyramids. Have you heard the new thing with the Giza that plateau, where they have those cylinders they've discovered through LiDAR or whatever they're using that they found some odd things underneath. What do you make of that?
Well, it's kind of vindication of what a lot of us have felt and known and believed, that we're in the realm of conspiracy theories for so many years, that there was this whole underground. I'm one of these people that believe the whole earth has, there's 11 dimensions and there's all these different underground groupings. Okay, it's not all one and the same. And so people call it the hollow earth. It doesn't mean that the earth is hollow like an empty egg. It means that there's caverns and there's different layers and there's different dimensions. So we know this was like vindicated with the string theory, is that there's, and Michio Kaku came out years ago and said there's 11 different dimensions. Well, that coincides exactly with Enoch, who was the frequent flyer who wrote that there were 10 heavens. So if you just use the word heaven and dimension interchangeably, you're talking about the same thing. So, and with the third dimension, our surface, that makes it 11. So I have always believed that there were underground cities coexisting with us, and they're ancient. So the fact that they discovered this under the Giza Plateau, which is ancient, it's much older than what a lot of us have been told, goes way back. I have a theory that I share in my books that this is all goes back to Atlantis. So that's where it all kind of began. And the same issues that we're dealing with now, culturally, socially, with the hybridization and all this stuff that's been had, the technology, is all stuff that has happened already. There's nothing new under the sun. And so let me just give it to you in a nutshell, if there is such a thing. So like Atlantis, okay, when that went down, so the people who survived it ended up in the land of Kem. So the Hoovids were ETs that came to Atlantis, and they ended up in the land of Kem. So Kem is where we get the word chemistry from, and then it morphed into the word Egypt. So it was basically that whole area, that Mesopotamia area, they ended up in Egypt. And so suffice to say that the Egyptians and the Hoovids were kind of inheritors of ancient Atlantis, the beings, the technology, which is why we have all this history with ancient Egypt. And part of the problem with Atlantis was that they had everything. Okay, they had it all. All right, they knew how to manifest through energy, through consciousness. They communicated with the earth. They communicated with the energies of crystals, and this is like Nikola Tesla type stuff that he came to reinsert, to put back into the record here. So all this ancient stuff has happened before. Then they lost it. Okay, so there was a downfall. So a lot of people think that the ETs came to upgrade us, but I have a different opinion based on the Sumerian tablets, is that they didn't come to upgrade us, they came to downgrade us. Okay, because the beings in Atlantis had everything. And because of their mistakes, they got power hungry. They wanted to control instead of work together with the creator. They went against the laws of creation by mixing and matching different species and different DNA, which was kind of like, it was like a transgression according to the creator. So, and it probably coincided with a passage of Nibiru, because this is what's written in the biblical, is that the Lord uses that to punish and cleanse the earth so he can start all over again.
So are we talking like the flood? Noah's
Yes.
flood? Well,
no, actually the first flood. So Noah's flood was the second one. So the Bible, a lot of people don't realize that the first beginning of the Bible, Genesis 1, verse 2 says, it starts off with, and the Spirit hovered over the waters of the earth, meaning that the earth was all water at one point, which was after the first flood, which was Atlantis. So when the Elohim came, and the Hebrew is very specific about plurality and singular, so it's all plural, that these were gods. Elohim means gods in Hebrew, not one. So the English, you don't get this, because the English, they just mistranslated and they just put God and Lord. So if an English person is reading the Old Testament and they go from book, they think it's all the same God, and it isn't, which explains why people say, well, why would God say this and then God say that? It's a contradiction, because it's not the same God. Okay, because they didn't translate the pluralities. All right. So we see in the original story in Genesis, this was a plurality of gods that came to the earth to basically reseed civilization after the floods of Atlantis, which is why that also explains why there were people that had survived that were on the earth. Because people say, well, if Adam and Eve and then they had Cain and Abel, then how did Cain and Abel marry um, the girl or the woman or Tamara, whatever her name was? Where did she come from? That's because there were people that had survived the floods, and just like there were beings that survived the second flood. And so because what they've done is they go underground. So when something happens, people go in caves, people go underground, and that's how they've survived. So that explains that. Then the same thing started to happen all over again. People were put on the earth, but they were living to be like 950. I mean, Methuselah lived to be 969, right?
Right.
So how is that possible? And then the floods of Noah came. And the floods of Noah, another downgrade. They went from living to be 900 and change to you're lucky if you're in live to be your 80s and your 90s. The telomere goes up to 120. So that's a huge genetic manipulation right there. That was, in my opinion, a downgrade, a downfall, which is the fall of humankind. So why did that happen? Well, lots of reasons, because of these battles over us, but also because the God of gods, the Father God, which in the Sumerian is Anu and in the Old Testament is Yahuwah. So they were trying to prevent the same problem from happening again. And one thing about us humans is that our history tends to repeat itself. And you can philosophize and say, well, gee, why do you think that is? I mean, maybe because we don't learn lessons from it, or maybe because they withhold the history, so we are like a species with amnesia, so we don't have anything to precedence or something to relate to, because we think it's new and it's really old. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're thinking the pyramids, as we see them today, weren't really built by the people that we perceive built them, like the Cleopatra era and all that. You think they're
slaves.
A lot, I mean, how did they move those stones and, to build those things? And if you look at the top of all the pyramids, it's kind of like it's worn out all the way up to a certain point, 20, 30 feet up. It looks kind of smooth, and it's worn down
Well,
like
they stole
water.
all the they stole all the limestone
Yeah.
from the stones.
Oh,
so that's
they?
why that one still has the cap on top.
Is that why? I thought it was like the water. It looks like water would come up, like the Sphinx has all the lines where water,
Yes, there were several floods and earth changes, and that's why they're older than we're told. I believe that they were built by the Atlanteans, the ETs. They were put there, and they're energy generators. They were there. That's why they're all over the planet. They're on Mars. They're on the moon, because they were used to generate energy, free energy, the energy that comes from the Earth itself. So those cylinders were probably, generators. But if you go even deeper than what they found, I believe there's a city underneath. Okay, so and it's also under Jerusalem. Okay, and Jerusalem is an ancient space portal, which is why they've been fighting over it all these years. Like, what other city on earth has been taken over by just about every empire on earth?
I've
Only Jerusalem.
I've heard the
And
spaceport theory. I like that.
there's a spaceport there. And that was the last lecture that Zecharia Sitchin gave, was all about Jerusalem. And he even revealed that there was an underground. So that's my theory, is that there's a lot happening beneath our feet that we're not aware of. I think this is the big alien reveal that we're coming into, is to meet who our neighbors are. Okay, we've been coexisting with them all these years. They've been living inside the earth, and we've been made to believe that they're visitors from other planets. That doesn't mean that they're not. They didn't come from someplace else, but they ended up here.
Yeah.
They're inside the earth, which explains why you see spaceships coming and going out of the oceans, and coming and going out of mountains. They literally come in and out of mountains.
And
too.
archaeologists are finding, caverns and underground cities like every year. You got Göbekli Tepe and
Yes.
many places all over the earth.
Yes, and Göbekli Tepe was a big one, where during one of the floods, they all went underground. So there's all this history about that. People went into caves. I saw this like illustration of like all these layers underneath Göbekli Tepe, that they lived underground while the earth changes were happening, when the surface of the planet was uninhabitable, which is what will happen again when this atmospheric storm comes over the earth at the end of this age, and it's going to create fires, because the prophecy says that the Lord will not, because there were two floods. So he said he promised, that was the whole rainbow covenant. He said he promised that he will not destroy the earth by floods again. That doesn't mean that there won't be floods in various places, because there are, okay? But I mean, the whole earth won't go down underwater again, but the last one will be by fire. So this makes sense, because what will happen, maybe even a nuclear proliferation, which is quite in the realms of possibilities. And it says that he returns, okay, on a scorched earth. So Revelation 21 talks about the New Jerusalem, the city of heaven, that comes out of the heavens, okay, and it's this city that has 12 gates, and it opens up, lands on a scorched earth. Each of these 12 gates are named after the 12 tribes of Israel, and he sits in the middle on a throne with an iron rod, and rules over the earth. But as he comes, the earth gets transformed into heaven on earth. So it's first destroyed, and then it gets transformed, and it's like, that's what they call the ascension.
It's reborn.
It's reborn, and there's no more death and illness and sickness and curses, and everybody lives for 1,000 years again. So he restores the original human blueprint that was made in the image and likeness of God. So that means that if your name is written in the book of life, you will be there, and you will live 1,000 years. That's what it says. That's the quintessential end time prophecy, when heaven comes to earth.
You were talking about the underground cities where they, lived underground because they couldn't live above anymore. Well, the Native Americans have that legend, right? The ant people came and took them underground because we couldn't live on top of the earth with the, catastrophes that were going on.
Exactly. Good point. And the Native Americans and the people in Peru have the same story too. The same thing happened there. And when they see the graves, they go, oh yeah, we know who they are. They're written in their caves. So there's a lot of similitude from these different cultures, because it's the same story.
Elle, have you heard the extraterrestrial theory? Is that one of the things that are coming to visit us in these craft are actually us from the future? This is what we actually evolved into looking like over thousands of years, and something happened and they have to come back to visit us. Have you heard that one? Yeah, they need to. Well, they're gathering greatest science fiction movies ever. They grab people or DNA, and because they're fixing something that went bad at a certain point, because of
nuclear
nuclear or breeding or anything. Have you heard that one? Michael P. Masters wrote a book about it.
Yes, yes.
And it was really good. It reads like a textbook, though, I have to tell you. It's a little bit dry. It took me a while to get through it. But it's a fascinating, it's because, you see, we evolve. We're evolving even in the most recent generations. Like if you notice, I don't know if you've noticed this, but men have less hair on their arms and legs already in the most recent generations. I mean, that's a small thing, but I mean, what is it going to be in thousands of years? We have genetic, as you stated, we had genetic manipulation back when, and what is it going to be thousands of years ahead of us? And after these horrible things happen to the earth, and
anything is possible.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's all part of the mix. And I think that that's probably an aspect of it, the time travelers, because they've manipulated the timeline so many times. So it explains there either had to be time travelers or CERN, which we have on the planet now that is able to adjust things. And I don't understand it all, but I know that it's happening.
You going to write another book? You going to keep going? I know we just got this one, but are you going to? Where does it go from here, Ella? I mean, you've got who's who in the cosmic zoo. Hopefully, if you've addressed all the things that have. Well, you haven't addressed all the things. I'm sure there's so many other things that that we don't even know. We can't even imagine have happened over the millennium.
Yeah, there's a lot, and we're only dealing with 5% of our brain. So just imagine when we get restored, then we'll be able to understand more. But my next book, which is coming out in May, is called The Cosmic Slingshot, and it connects the dots to reincarnation in the Bible and the End Time Prophesies. So, in a nutshell, Christians have been lied to by the Church of Rome. They're the ones that manipulated the calendar. And they basically deleted they attempted to delete reincarnation out of the Bible when they were canonizing it during the Nicene councils. So one thing we can always count on, and that's human error. So they pulled in a couple of monks. They were only as good as their understanding of the Hebrew. They probably deleted a bunch of stuff, but they left 24 scriptures behind, as well as the Hebrew word for reincarnation, which they didn't understand, which is all throughout the Bible. Again, doesn't show up in the English because it's so much mistranslations. But suffice to say, the Hebrew word for reincarnation is kapakela. Okay, and this was coined by King David, and it literally translates to cosmic slingshot. And It was the belief that is an ancient core Jewish belief. And let's not forget, Christianity came out of Judaism. Yeshua, Jesus, was Jewish, and he had conversations about this, which I expose in the book as well. But that they believed that the soul came back. It went into the afterlife, did its processing, and came back like in a slingshot into a baby body. And there's so many scriptures in there that they left behind that they just didn't understand. Okay, but it's deep in Judaic literature. So it's in the Zohar and the Talmud and the Torah, and the Kabbalah. So I'm pulling all that out and proving that Christians have been lied to. And that why is this important? Because if they want to discern the end time prophecies, this is a piece of it. And that if they don't have this piece and understanding of that God reincarnates people for all kinds of reasons, then they're not going to be able to discern and identify who's coming back in this end time drama, because it's a reincarnation of these ancient this ancient evil king, as well as all these people. And the scriptures are so clear about this, that that and it's like, well, anyone could just like look at this one that's written 3 times through the Old Testament and the New Testament, is that when Yeshua returns, it says that those on the earth will see him coming, and they will mourn on the one whom they pierced. Okay, and pierced is biblical vernacular for crucifixion. How is that possible if they've been dead for 2,000 years? Because the people who were involved in the crucifixion were, died. So how are they on the earth when he returns? And it's very specific, and it's repeated 3 times through the Torah and in the New Testament. So it's like a corroborative match. So the only answer is reincarnation. So we can philosophize and say, why? Because God wants to give him a chance to get things straight, repent. And also he wants everyone to be saved. God doesn't want to throw people into hell or the lake of fire. The lake of fire wasn't created for humans. The lake of fire, it says, was created for Satan and the fallen angels. He doesn't want humans there. He wants everyone to be saved. I mean, this is the Father God. He's merciful, and he gives many chances. So somehow the church has gotten all this twisted because they use it as a manipulation to control people. They said, oh, you got one life to live. You better get it right with the church, otherwise you're going to hell. That's a manipulation, okay? Yeah. But that's not God's word. So the cosmic slingshot exposes this, and hopefully, will help people to understand why they're here now. And it's not so much about the future, it's about the past, and how the past repeats itself because it needs to be corrected. Okay? So this is the whole Atlantean. I have a whole chapter about Atlantis in there, and how people are on the earth right now have memories about Atlantis. And another piece that blew my mind was our government. Here's a disclosure for you. Our government found they use psychic spies, right? Remote viewers, psionics. Mm-hmm. So they put some psychic spies to work at a specific location back in the 70s called Project Stargate. And they were picking up about something that happened in another time. That location, but a different timeline. And that's when the CIA said, wait a second, they're picking up past lives. So then they threw all this money and energy into this program to basically get information about past lives. Okay? So they literally scientifically proved reincarnation. So that's in the mix too.
Ella, did you start doing all of this research when you went to study in Israel? Because you were, 15 or 16? Is that when you started getting into this, when you were delving more into, Hebrew religion? Or did you start doing your research later on in life?
It came after I graduated, because I just got through the program, did what I had to do, graduated, and then one thing led to another, and then I started remembering what I was taught, and then started connecting back to it. So yeah, I think it's just, growing up.
Yeah. Well, you got your degree in astronomy, that led to astrology, and then religion, and it's all tied together.
Yes, and I'm not a religious person at all. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, just like everyone else. I just find it fascinating, the manipulations, and what really drew me in were the prophecies. That's why I studied the Bible after I graduated, because I got involved with the prophecies, and astrology is part of that. So it's all connected.
What do you think happens when you die? We're hoping it's not black. Yeah. I mean, what is the progression? I mean, we had a guy on that talked about the afterlife a couple of years ago. And he says you go up and then you see someone that looks like a family member or a friend or something. And they give you a choice. You can either stay there or you can be reincarnated and come back down to Earth. And so if you stay there, you can do anything you want. You can be anything you want. Everyone's kind. And but it showed. I said, well, what about the axe murderer? What about this?
The criminals.
Yeah. What about the people that have done people wrong? And he says you convey what people that you talk to in this realm actually feel what and convey what the people felt that you actually killed. And it's some kind of lesson. And I said, okay, fine. It's like, to me, you can do anything you want. It's kind of like, you eat candy corn and you can have a couple of handfuls of candy corn. And it's like, I don't want candy corn anymore. So I do anything I want.
Well, I believe in reincarnation, and I think like those criminals and axe murderers, that they just haven't lived many lives and they haven't evolved yet. That's my theory, but I believe totally in reincarnation and that we are reborn many times.
But they can go...
And we learn our lessons and we move on and we become better with every life.
He said, when I asked him about staying there and doing the same thing all the time, whatever you want, or do whatever you want, he says you can go to a higher realm. You can actually graduate, for lack of a better term, and go to a higher realm into, I don't know what the ultimate thing would be, but
Shibalba.
It made me feel a lot better about death. I can tell you that. After reading that interview.
And reincarnation is supposed to do that because it's like you can't do everything in one life, and there's reasons. There's missions. There's people die before their time. What happens to them? Alysse, what you just described is exactly what's written in the Torah, whether you realize it or not. So the evil, wicked souls, they get 4 chances. It says this is written. This is in the new book. I mean, it's
I
right
didn't know
there.
that it was a number. So 4 chances.
They get 4 chances to improve, and if they just continue to be wicked and evil and they don't improve, then they're terminated. They don't get to reincarnate. The righteous, it says, if they improve and they grow and they evolve and they learn lessons through each lifetime, they can incarnate up to 1,000 times. Okay? Because let's face it, if you have eternal life, whether you believe in Christ and he gives you eternal life, eternity is now. Okay? So it's yesterday, it's now, and it's tomorrow. So who's to say that reincarnation isn't part of eternity? And there are people there are souls, and it says this, that he chooses to go back to Earth because they're trusted. They've been tried and trusted, that he can trust these souls to carry out specific missions for the kingdom of heaven.
To do the right thing.
And this is something I prove in this book, like Melchizedek, for instance. Okay, now this may be a bit wild for some people, but really it's not that much of a stretch. So Melchizedek, which in Hebrew means the king of righteousness. He was also the king of Salem. Salem became Jerusalem, the city of peace. He has no genealogy, no beginning, and no end. He never died. He's one of the 4 frequent flyers or ascended masters, we call them, that never died. Okay? So he shows up several times along the timeline in the Old Testament. Then Yeshua comes, right? He's born through a woman. He's incarnated. They call it the incarnation. He's born through a woman. Okay? Then after he dies and gets resurrected and ascends to heaven, they write all this stuff because he is a high priest in the order of Melchizedek. Whoa, where did that come from? So it says in the Old Testament that Melchizedek was this high priest, and his authority came from heaven, not earth. Okay, so call him an ET, call him an ultra-terrestrial too. But he had all these powers, he had all these mystical powers. He would show up and then he would disappear. And there were all these groupings, like at Petra, the Knights Templar were after him. Okay, so if it says that Yeshua was a priest after the order of Melchizedek, that means that his priesthood doesn't come from the authority of an earth tribe, because Yeshua was born of the tribe of Judah, not Levites, and only the Levites were the priests. That was an earthly tribe, but he's not of an earthly tribe. He's of a heavenly tribe. So then, just to carry this one step further, a lot of Christian scholars actually believe in what they call Christophanies. Okay, a Christophany is a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ before he was born, meaning the Old Testament. So there's 4 stories that show that, and most Christian scholars believe that. Like, that's just their belief. So I'm taking it one step further and saying, well, if you can believe that when Melchizedek showed up and had lunch with Abraham, or he showed up with Joshua, or he showed up, at different points of the timeline, and they were called Christophanies, pre-incarnate appearances of Jesus Christ, then that means that the incarnation, and he was considered the high priest after the order of Melchizedek, then that means that the incarnation of Christ was the reincarnation of Melchizedek, which is what I'm proving in the book through scripture. Okay, and the communion that all Christians do, who started that? Melchizedek. He was the one that broke the bread and had it with the wine, and Jesus copied that, maybe because he's one and the same being. And this proves that God not only reincarnates high-level beings, people come back to correct things. The Torah calls it teshuvah, which means correction, to learn the lesson. Okay, it's just like a father, parents and children. How many chances do you give your kid when they fall? Okay, get up, try again, get up, try again. You'll get it, and eventually you do. So who's to say that God doesn't give us, that many chances to get things straight? And what's a big deal in the Torah is marriage. Okay, relationships. Okay, people come back to make things right. Like maybe they divorced their soulmate and they have to come back to put things right. All kinds of situations like that, because God is a God of relationship, and it's evidenced through reincarnation.
I've got a lot of reading to do. I have to go get all your books now. I'm going to spend the summer reading your books.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
All right, Ella, we're going to wrap it up.
Cool.
Thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And we will. I definitely want to have you on again. How many interviews have you been? We found you through Dan Harari, I think, right? The PR guy. Yeah, he's going to be at Contact in the Desert. You going to go to Contact in the Desert?
I'll be
Not
there.
this year. No. You'll be there?
Yeah, I was there last year. I had a great time.
Alysse is a regular there.
I'm volunteering.
She's
this
volunteering
year.
too.
Oh, wonderful.
Cool. All right, Ella. We'll see you next time. It was a great show.
Thanks,
I appreciate it. And good luck. Good luck with the book. I hope everything's doing well.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Right. Bye now. Well, that was pretty awesome. What do you think?
That was great.